Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel discussion on pandemic and beyond towards a gender-inclusive recovery presented by ETHRWorld Women Trailblazers. Often due to pre-existing gender inequalities and social cultural norms, women have been unreasonably affected by the social and economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. In this discussion today with our esteemed panel members, we aim to explore practices and challenges in accounting for gender-differentiated impacts on economic recovery and business continuity. Through this discussion, we will seek your opinions on how organizations can promote gender equality as a part of the recovery sustainability process. I am Anushree Sharma, Assistant News Editor, ETHRWorld International, and will be your host and moderator for this session. And I'm glad to welcome all of you to this exclusive discussion. And I have a pleasure of joining me in this discussion with our esteemed panelists, including Kavita Singh, who is the CHRO, United Breweries Limited. Kavita is an accomplished HR professional with over 20 years of experience in FMCG, natural resources, mining and metals, shipping, supply chain and logistics, financial services, and telecom. Further, she has experience in HR practices across geographies and emerging markets, Africa, Middle East, Europe, and Indian subcontinent. Pleasure to have you, Kavita, joining with us.
Thank you so much, Anushree, and glad to be here.
Thank you. We also have with us Anupam Trehan, who is the Senior Director, People and Communities, APJC, Cisco. Anupam works with senior leaders and their leadership team to build integrated talent and people strategies with specific focus on strategic workforce planning, leadership development and coaching, talent management, in addition to providing human resources expertise in the areas of employee relations, coaching and development, conflict management, organizational development, and more. She has previously worked with JP Morgan, Delphi Technical Center, and Tata Autocom across various functions in HR. Welcome, Anupam. So great to have you in this panel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Anushree.
And we also have with us Deepti Verma, HR Leader, Corporate, APAC, and MENA, Amazon. Deepti has been working with Amazon for the past 10 years. Prior to Amazon, she was working as Director Human Resources with Dr. Reddy Laboratories, heading corporate HR and talent acquisition. Over the last 23 years, she has been associated with diverse industries such as e-commerce, information technology, pharmaceutical, and manufacturing industry, and has had significant global exposure to all facets of HR and organizational effectiveness. Hi, Deepti, welcome.
My pleasure, and really happy to be here with the esteemed panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. So I once again extend a warm welcome to our speakers and the audience joining us in this special International Women's Day session, and look forward to a great discussion and learning. So Kavita, Anupam, and Deepti, I'll first start with a question, and this question is open to all. So how has COVID-19 impacted the gender gap in your industry?
I can start, firstly, when the whole pandemic had hit us, the numbers of women who were, finding it challenging or dropping out from the corporate world were quite huge. In fact, one of the studies that I read from McKinsey was that job loss in women during COVID-19 was 1.8 times higher than that of men, and around 5.7% women got affected as compared to 3.1% who lost their jobs. There was another study that I remember we had done around the time that it got started, was that women had to actually put around 40% more work at home during the COVID time as compared to men. And if you look at some of the studies which was done globally, it said that women had to spend at least 2 hours more at home to just take care of the home front. So when it started, I think quite a lot of women had to drop off, and they were finding it very challenging to manage kids at home and taking care of parents and so on and so forth. But I must say that over a period of time, not just Amazon, but many organizations has used this as a kind of a mechanism to see if there are women who are at home and who would want to start working, give them a launch pad to start working from home. In fact, I can give you an example of Amazon itself. We have a program called Rekindle, where women who always wanted to get them back into the industry. And we had launched it earlier, but we never saw so much of success. During COVID, we had around 100 women who actually joined us from different industries across the levels. And that was such a big revelation for us that we realized that it's just a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of environment that you need to create for them, and they're really eager to come back to the workforce. So while initially the numbers had really gone down, and I was really worried as to whether this gap would just increase, but I feel that in last few months or in last few, maybe 1.5 years, I'm seeing that there is a change and there is an upward trend. So people have actually used this as a great way to induct more and more women into the workforce.
Thanks, Deepti, for sharing. Anupam, I would like to, or Kavita, I would like to invite both of you to share your views around here.
Sure, happy to. And I can, probably take off from what Deepti mentioned. I think, especially when you start to look at the technology industry, I think sometimes the technology industry fares a little better. It's interesting when you actually take a step back and you look at it, the representation of women in the workforce over the last decade has been increasing or improving, right? Which is an absolute positive step, whether it's improvement in representation just as an overall workforce, whether that is representation of women in leadership positions, like we've started to make progress, and that was absolutely awesome. What's ended up happening in the pandemic, like Deepti mentioned, is the reality that ended up facing a lot of women was not just did the pandemic make us work from home, but also work for home, right? And so suddenly this added responsibility of working for the house, whether that was cooking or cleaning or childcare or elder care or just other homework, started to put a lot of pressure. And I think what that ended up doing in a lot of the industries is it kind of forced a point where the necessity of organizations to start to lead with empathy, for organizations to truly believe in flexibility started to come up, because some of this reality was not just a gender thing. Like I think when the pandemic hit, I think everybody felt the pressure. So I think the need to lead with empathy, the need to have flexibility came in a very, very big way. I think the other very positive thing, and we saw this in Cisco as well, is it was a difficult time for everybody. And one is you can do activities and initiatives and programs from a corporate or an organization perspective. But the way some of our employee resource organizations or our employee networks actually rallied around each other, right? Like in terms of providing support, in terms of being there for each other, it was absolutely phenomenal to see. I do feel like if you take a step forward, what the pandemic has also shown us is that the way we work and where we work from is going to change drastically. So I do feel while it did cause us a temporary pain, it is going to be something that's actually going to help us in the longer run in actually balancing representation in the workforce.
I completely agree with you, Anupam, with, the responsibility, we started working, working from home. There was a lot of flexibility angle to it, but then the burnout level also increased. That's a great point, Anupam. Kavita, I'll come to you. Your thoughts about it.
Yeah, and I would just augment what Deepti and Anupam have shared earlier, that although the pandemic has hit different industries differently, but I think there's a great leveler in technology, which all the companies have embraced. And I think the adaptation of technology has sped up the change that we would have envisaged to happen a few years later. So I think from an FMCG point of view, I can share that, and also from a manufacturing point of view, I can share that it has really helped in bringing more diverse workforce, to the fore, and bringing more visibility to different options, because across levels, people are using technology to understand the right opportunities. They're able to compare information. They're able to look at various options. And I think organizations that have demonstrated flexibility, that have highlighted that they can work with trust across geographies, I think those are things that have really mattered in the way we've been able to embrace a more diverse workforce, especially in an FMCG product company which is regulated. So beer, for example, in the alcohol sector, if it's regulated, then there are only certain ways of reaching, and there is in our country there is a taboo, which is associated to working with certain sectors. So how does the new generation actually embrace the vision of the company? How do they go beyond the traditional thoughts about an industry and start exploring opportunities that are, a mechanical engineer who works with the manufacturing company could also work with us, and there's nothing different that they do. But in the mindset, it has always been that, when you work with a certain sector, there are certain assumptions that people have. So I think those are some things that have really been transcended through technology, and I think we've been able to reach to a deeper level in terms of talent, and have been able to use that to our advantage, I would say.
Sure. True, Kavita. And in fact, moving on to the next question, I'll stay with you, Kavita. Deepti and Anupam mentioned about how important it is to embrace empathy. And you also put forward the role of trust that employers and employees have in between to really embrace inclusive environment. So when it comes to leadership, and we talk about, leaders need to talk. So when it comes to leadership, how is leadership supposed to respond to having an inclusive organization in context to the new ways of working? What should be their mindset, or what sort of behavioral changes they need to embrace to really, put forward an inclusive organization?
Yeah, so like we spoke about trust. I think trust has always been a very key ingredient for leaders to lead well, but I think now more than ever. So it's like, if you don't create, because you're managing people who you're not meeting as often you did earlier, you're not physically connecting. So there's a lot of self-thought that also comes, and while working across the screen has promoted meritocracy, focus on content, etc. But I think the positivity of relationships cannot be undermined, and I think that is something that each leader still needs to really work with. So I would say that apart from the competence and the consistency of delivering results, managing and building trust, managing and building positive relationships, and exercising good judgment and expertise in your field to lead your team are very key. And I also like what Anupam said earlier about care. And care for me is intentional, and it leads to empathy. So every organization, and it is a buzzword now because there are some which are like basics that we need to provide, but I think if you have to go beyond, then I think there are huge opportunities for organizations to work for their team members and the employees, but also the society at large. So not just care for our own people, but also the care for people around us, and also the planet around us. So those are aspects, because the newer generation is not just driven by what we do for ourselves. They would also want to see what, or associate themselves with organizations that do beyond themselves. So I think those would be some virtues that I would associate, and of course there could be more, but I think these are core.
Definitely, Kavita. Anupam and Deepti, would you like to add your thoughts around this?
I just want to say that what Kavita is saying is something which we at Amazon just started very recently. We always had 14 leadership principles, but we've just added on to 2. And one of the leadership principles that we started very recently was being Earth-Best employer. And by being Earth-Best employer, what we basically started saying was that all the leaders need to lead with empathy. And when we say that we need to lead with empathy, we say that leaders are people who are, not only having fun at workplace, they're also making it easy for others to have fun. And they need to make the environment safe, more productive, and more diverse. So that's one leadership principle. I was so happy when I was hearing your thoughts, because I felt that what you're saying is actually what we are trying to practice day to day. And we realized that during the COVID times, it became so, so obvious that even managers whom we are expecting them to manage those large teams are employees themselves. They're human themselves. They're going through so much of stress. So when we expect them to actually have that empathetic relationship with others, what are we trying to do for them? So it has to be something where everybody feels safe and everybody brings their authentic self to their work front, and then we should decide as to what we should bring to the table. The other thing, which was the 16th leadership principle that we focused on, which again recently got added, was our social responsibility, which was again something Kavita was saying. So I was actually thinking you were like promoting what we are already thinking, which we said that we should leave the surroundings much better place for people around us. And it is very important for us to do that because, it's not just about what you're doing to yourself, it is also about what you're doing for the people around. And, COVID actually made everybody realize how important it is to, just be there for each other. In fact, I'm sure all of you must have read about the COVID warriors that we went about doing. It was not an HR initiative. It was just all people from all across different cities, tier 1, tier 2 cities. They just came together, those leaders just came together and they said, we have to take care of employees, their families, people, surrounding those families, and whether it was oxygen concentrator or beds or anything. This basically showed the spirit of, just helping each other. And I think that is such an important spirit. And I felt that, while of course, there has been a lot of setbacks due to COVID, but it has taught us a different way of living. It has taught us a different way of just sharing things, taking care of the environment, just taking care of the person next to us, and just taking care of our own physical and mental well-being.
Thanks, Deepti, for sharing that. Anupam, I'll come to you. And while we have been talking about different kind of behavioral changes and the mindsets and the kind of skills or competencies that would be required from the leaders and the managers and employee themselves to build that inclusive workplace. But as we talk about the future of work, we are talking about that we are moving out of the pandemic. Then there are certain conversations like we are going back to the office, or maybe we will embrace hybrid workplace. What are some of the changes or maybe trends that you see and or anticipate with respect to being an all-inclusive workplace? How's future of work going to impact the inclusive workplaces now?
Thanks, Anushree. I think depending on what you read, I think the future of work is either hybrid or some people look at it fully remote. I think the vote is still out on what people think will be the future of work. But the more I read about it, the more it seems to be hybrid is the way to go. I think regardless of industry, that is the direction in which most organizations and industries are moving. And what I think is that provides us such a beautiful platform to actually start to look at a diverse workforce. Like, I'll give you a simple example. So at Cisco, for example, we had offices across 10 cities, right? So we had 10 offices across the country, like the workforce used to come in there. Over the last 2 years, that has now gone up to 300 cities across the country where we have our workforce. Right? And it's amazing, right? Like, you no longer are starting to target workforce that is based in a specific location or that looks like a specific type for certain roles. And I think the opportunity that hybrid allows us, because like Kavita said, I think technology plays a great leveler in this space, right? Because it allows you to connect, it allows you to collaborate, it allows you to innovate, it allows you flexibility, and it allows you to drive value and impact in whatever job you do, without really compromising or affecting your productivity, your well-being, right? So there is that balance that technology really, really helps us. And I think if as organizations start to leverage hybrid, I think the piece around opening our minds into really tapping into diverse employee populations, whether that is women who want to return back to work, whether that's a completely different population that we want to tap into, right? Whether that's career changers, for example. I think there's such an opportunity that we have, both in terms of how we attract talent and then how do we invest in them from a development and an engagement perspective. I think that is absolutely going to be important. I do think one of the key things that's going to be important as well is how do you continue to be inclusive, right? Work from home was not new, at least not in the tech space, right? But work from home always came in with a certain amount of bias. I will be honest to say that, right? Like there was always a certain amount of bias that came with work from home. And I think what's going to be the key, right, for diversity to flourish in a hybrid workplace is for individuals and more specifically leaders to be very, very aware of their biases, both conscious and unconscious, and how that plays up and shows up, especially across all their people and talent decisions. I think how does inclusion show up in a hybrid work? Because at the end of the day, if you look at it, 64% of employees globally have said that they want flexibility in the work, right? So they want flexibility to make that choice, whether they want to work from an office, whether they want to work from a home, whether they want to toggle between the two. And if you look back as individuals and as professionals, what all of us want is we want to work in an organization where you feel valued, where you feel respected, where you feel heard, right? So when you start to marry that in, I think the role of the leader, right, leading the way by being inclusive, by being very aware of where bias is stepping into play becomes very, very important. And I think the other one that's going to be a key skill, I think not just for leaders, but for all of us as well, is to learn how to ask, listen, versus assuming what others may need to help be inclusive or to help get their job done better. I think we're just asking the right questions and listening very, very attentively. I think those are going to be some of the things that are going to really, really help us. But I do feel like we're in the positive step. I think hybrid work absolutely allows us to tap into a very, very diverse workforce and the opportunity for us to build an inclusive workplace.
Thank you, Anupam. I think you put up a very pertinent point about managing bias in the remote setup, because earlier, or maybe most of the time, we are thinking that work from home is going to prove like an equalizer for women employees at work. However, at the same time, we are also letting go of the biases that may exist. There's a lot of employees have the tendency that, the more visible I will be to my managers, the better performance appraisal or, the opportunities that I'll get. So I think that's one example of bias that exists in remote workplaces. So I think that's very pertinent point, and organizations need to focus on the biases that's gonna exist in the hybrid form of work. Deepti, I'll come back to you, and I want to understand your point of view about how what are some of the trends do you anticipate in an all-inclusive workplace when it comes to future of work?
So, frankly speaking, while, and I'll be slightly controversial here, while most of the organizations say that we are going to go with a hybrid, or we will come back, or we will be staying from home, I think we all can't really predict how the future will be. One thing that COVID has taught us is every time we are trying to plan something, things really change. We had wave 1, wave 2, kind of a thing. So, I think what we need to do is that we need to make sure that we are empowering our leaders to make the right choices. And I'm going to again take the example of Amazon itself. If you look at the Amazon employee base, there's such a varied kind of a employee base. We have people who are working in operations, technology, people who are coming and delivering packages to them. We have people who are working on Alexa Labs, AWS, Prime Videos who are making those from screen. So you can't have one size fit all, and the approach that we would have for them would be very, very different. What we could do is we could actually empower the leaders to say that, there is merit in actually having this social interaction. And it's not easy just to be sitting at home and just staring at the laptop. You do need to have that social interaction. The culture is understood very well when you interact with people and so on and so forth. We give the choice in hands of the manager to decide what would be the right frequency that he or she would like their teams to come to office. And I think we will obviously, what future has in store for us, we will certainly look at that and we'll try and work that out and see how it is. But I think one of the ways in which most organizations would start operating is to start giving those flexibility to people. And as rightly pointed out, I think both Anupam and Kavita were talking about that, these models of working from home existed even before COVID actually started. But I think it will become more important for us to give the flexibility to people who have now started operating from different cities or countries and wanting to make it work. We would have to give the onus in their hand instead of putting hard and fast rules.
I think this will also ask managers to, really, really have a new playbook in the way they manage their teams, uh, connecting on work. And I think there is also the other extreme of working fully from home. It may actually create a gap where people feel the need of being connected with their colleagues at work. So I think that genuineness that has to transcend through the screen. I think that is a very, very important factor that a leader needs to develop. I think Anupam also spoke about communicating more. So, there have been different styles of leadership, and people believe in different styles of leadership working for them. But there is when you're working remotely or when you have a hybrid, working model, you can't always have a monologue, so participation is key, quality of communication is key, right messaging is key, because if you look at how employees perceive fairness, which is a big factor on discretionary effort or in other things that people associate and would like to continue with the company, fairness and the perception of fairness is a big factor. So if you look at it, the information flow and transparency of information is one of the biggest factors that connects an employee to the company. And how do you do that in this age and world where you have various models working? We still have factories that are running, and you can't work remotely in a factory. You need to get to the factory and produce the product. You need to distribute it. You need to connect with the outlets. So there are various models, and like Dipti was saying, it is too early for us to come out with the verdict that this is the way to go forward, because their packets can't be delivered remote. Somebody has to walk that mile, and even during the pandemic they were doing that. So I would say that one of the biggest shifts that is needed is how do leaders or managers respond to the need of the new workforce. I think that conscientiousness has to really set in the way we look at our team members, because they have too many choices. India is a hot market right now, and it is an employees market. It is not an employers market right now. So if you have to be the team that somebody chooses to be in, then there is a lot beyond just the money, the infrastructure, the name, etc. It is the perception of how you will be treated and what is the value that you're driven by and how you're contributing in a team that will drive people towards you. And I have seen that it really makes a huge difference to the new generation. Also, one more thing that I want to add is, when we are all working remotely and not connecting with people, and you were saying that the boundaries with the flexi time between personal time and office time has blurred. It's also important to take care of oneself. I think Dipti alluded to that earlier. However, there is an element of fun that is now missing. I mean, when you're not meeting people, physically, you can have coffee across the screen or whatever. But I think the element of enjoying, celebrating, having fun should not be underestimated. This is very, very important. And this is one of the things that we have adapted as one of our values in our company, to enjoy and have fun.
Awesome, Kavita. That was a really awesome point. Taking care of oneself is first and foremost. I also like the point how you mentioned about it's an employee-driven market and how critical it is for leaders to deliver on those needs to be really claim that success in the market. So that's really a very nice point. So I also want to come back to the point of bias. We are talking a lot about bias, and the theme this year for International Women's Day is break the bias. So as we conclude the session and a lot of learnings and a lot of insights that have come from our previous discussion, I would like to invite all of you, Kavita, Deepti, and Anupam, to share your thoughts about how are you going to, or how do you choose to break the bias in your organization?
Okay. I can go first. If I were to talk about my company and what I am passionate about, I'm definitely driven towards breaking the bias on unequal pay for men and women. So I'm a big propagator of equal pay, and that is something that I want to, and I am driving in our organization. And the second one is the bias of looking at women suitable only for certain jobs and functions. I feel there is no job that a woman cannot do, and it is very important that we dissolve those biases in the in the minds of people who think that only these jobs can be done by women. So in my sector, in my organization, and in the functions, I'm committed to drive to break that bias as well.
Great, Kavita. Anupam, let's move to you and understand what do you choose to break the bias?
Sure, and Anushree, I hope it's okay if I answer the question in two ways, right? Like one, how would I do this in my role with the organization? But second, also as an individual, right? Because I think I'm like, this is an area of absolute, like I'm extremely passionate about this area. I think as the head of HR for Cisco, right, I think for me, it is very, very important that I continue to be an advocate and I continue to champion for all things inclusion, right, in our organization, right, across all our people and talent processes. 4 years back, we launched a skill-based hiring approach, right, where we actually started to look at hiring without actually having people look at a resume. Like, I will tell you this, initially when we first put that idea across, people were like, how do you even do that? It's now become a part and parcel of our process. It's become a business as usual process. But how do we continue to look at our people processes, whether that's the way we acquire, whether that's even the talent pools that we're looking, right? So widening the scope from traditional talent pools. How do we continue to engage? How do we invest in development? I think just continuing to be an advocate and continuing to be that sponsor and continuing to be a champion for all things I&D across all our people processes in my role, right? I think second, as an individual, and I'm sure Deepthi and Kavita will admit, like, I think none of our journeys is a smooth or a straight journey, right? We've all had bumps along the way. We've all had curves along the way. And one of the things that has really helped me personally in my journey is this network of mentors and sponsors. Sometimes even when I didn't know that they were rooting for me, right? Like, but just having a network of people that were there for you, that were there behind you, that have pushed you forward, that have challenged you, that have really, really broadened your horizons, right? And for me individually, that is something that I do want to continue to pay it forward. So I think I will also continue to do my bit in terms of being a mentor, in terms of being a sponsor for some of our women employees. I think that is just something that I think is something I will continue to do.
Sure, I think quite a lot has been already covered by Kavita and Anupam. I just want to add, I think the first bias that I think we need to fight against is our own mindset. A lot of time, I think we have biases which we weren't even aware about. And I'm giving an example of my own life journey. Whenever there was some critical position or critical thing would come my way, I would first think, if I pick up this, how would it affect my family? Will I be able to spend that time with my family or not? And if there would be something which would be, let's say overseas, I would say that, oh my God, my child is so small, how would I just go for this trip, and so on and so forth. I still remember the first trip that I went after my son was 8 months old. He wasn't crying, I was crying while leaving at the airport. And he was absolutely okay when I came back. It was me who was like having this guilt trip. So I think those biases are in our mind, that we feel that the people around us, people at home, people everywhere, will not be able to survive if we are not there for them all throughout. I think I still remember, my son is now 17 years old. He once told me, and I was about to get on to taking on a bigger opportunity, he once told me, Mom, if you would have stayed at home and been a housewife, I wonder what would have happened to me. It would have driven me crazy. So in some ways, I'm so happy that you go to office. I've become more independent and I am sane because, I see the way you need to be busy all the time. You would have used all your energy onto myself. So I feel biggest bias before I try to change the organization is to change my mindset. And then mindset of those women who sometimes are at those conflicting times trying to take the blame on themselves to say that, no, I can't do this because family needs me, this family support. I think those are more difficult to break as compared to the ones which we can see easily. The ones that you can see easily, you can fix it. But the ones which are so ingrained are the ones which takes longer to do. And I'm sitting here talking to you, giving suggestions on what it can be. Do I have biases still? The answer is yes. I get up every day feeling guilty. Is it the right thing to do? Am I doing justice? My son is just about to go to college. Am I spending enough time with my son, or so on and so forth? So there are so many questions. I think for me, the journey would start from me.
That's an awesome point, Deepti. Until unless we do not let go of self-bias, I don't think we will be able to shift the mindset of other people when it comes to diversity and inclusion. That's a wonderful point, Deepti. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our speakers, Anupam, Kavita, and Deepti. This has been a very insightful discussion, lot of points, lot of learnings. And I'm sure our audience will also have a lot of things to go back and, reimagine their strategy around diversity, inclusion, and equity. So thank you so much for joining us. And with this, I would like to conclude this session. Thank you so much to our speakers for inspiring and this lovely conversation. I'm sure our audience will be encouraged by the beginnings of a massive cultural shift in the workplace on gender equality and inclusivity. But then that needs to continue in the times to come. With that hope, I would like to thank you, Kavita, Anupam, and Deepti, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts with all of us. Thank you and have a great day.